Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Okay, so today we're tackling something that might sound, I don't know, a little dry at first,
Mm.
but trust me, it's fascinating. We're looking at women's PPE, personal protective equipment,
Yeah.
specifically in construction.
Yeah. Interesting area. Lots to unpack there.
Right. And we've got a great source to work with, too. It's an article from ROSPE, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents. So, these folks are the authority on safety.
Definitely. Add some weight to the discussion for sure.
Totally. So the main point the article makes is this. We've got more and more women entering the construction industry, which is awesome.
Huge shift.
But a lot of the safety gear, the PPE, it's still mostly designed for men's bodies.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Big time.
Yeah.
And it's not just about comfort either. This is about serious safety risks for women on job sites.
Absolutely.
Wait, think about it. Remember all those stories during COVID? Female healthcare workers struggling with masks and gowns that just didn't fit right,
Oh, yeah.
putting them at extra risk.
Makes you think.
Well, it turns out this PPE issue, it's not just healthcare. It's not just pandemics. It's way bigger. This article points out, get this, globally, women make up something like 70% of frontline healthcare jobs.
Wow. I didn't realize it was that high.
Right, but the PPE isn't keeping up. So, okay, let's get down to brass tacks. What makes ill-fitting PPE so dangerous?
Well, imagine your boots don't fit.
Okay, yeah,
More likely to trip, slip, maybe even a fall, right?
makes sense.
Harness that's not sitting right, doesn't protect you properly in a fall, gloves too loose, could get caught in machinery.
Yikes. Okay, now that's scary.
Yeah, and even if we set aside those worst-case scenarios, just working all day in gear that's uncomfortable, it messes with your focus, productivity takes a hit.
I get that. Like
Yeah.
trying to do your taxes in shoes that are 2 sizes too big, you're not thinking about the numbers, you're thinking about your feet.
Exactly.
So here's what blew my mind in this article. Women's PTE. It actually exists.
It does.
Yeah. There's even a website, ppethatfits.com. It's like a whole directory for suppliers. So the solutions are out there.
Huh. So what's the holdup then?
I guess the question, isn't it? The article really hammers this point. It's not that women's PPE is impossible to find. It's that employers just aren't providing it. Like they're not even aware.
Really?
The article says almost 60% of UK employers aren't supplying women's PPE, even though it's readily available.
That's wild.
And get this, it's not just the UK. The US, Canada, Australia, they all have similar issues. It's almost like we've got the answer before we even fully grasp the problem.
That is a good way to put it. So why aren't employers getting on board with this?
Well, the article brings up the whole cost thing.
Yeah.
Employers saying it's too pricey to stock women's PPE. But honestly, is that a good enough excuse?
Let's break that down, because I think there's a bigger picture here that we need to consider.
Okay, so let's talk about the economics of safety.
Yeah, let's do that. Because when you look at the numbers, getting everyone the right PPE, it actually makes good financial sense. Think about what happens when there's an accident. Insurance claims, maybe fines, legal battles, lost productivity while things are sorted out. That all adds up.
So you're saying not providing the right PPE, it could actually end up costing more in the long run.
Bingo. Plus, when gear fits right, it lasts longer, right? So you're replacing it less often. Win-win, safer workplaces, A&D, smarter spending.
I like the sound of that. Although the article does mention some things are still tough to find, like harnesses and helmets made specifically for women.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Shows that even with all the progress, we've still got hurdles to overcome.
For sure.
Definitely more to dig into here. It's not just about what the issues are, but why these things are still happening.
Agreed. There's a human side to this story that we haven't even touched on yet.
It's like, if your gear's always a mess, you're fiddling with it, you're not going to be focused on the job.
Right. And that lack of focus, it can snowball into bigger problems, feeling self-conscious all the time. That can really chip away at your confidence.
The article even says that some women, they're actually put off from certain jobs or from moving up in their careers purely because of the PPE situation.
It's kind of a hidden barrier, isn't it? If you don't feel comfortable, you don't feel safe, you're less likely to stick around.
Exactly. And that's a loss for everyone, the women themselves and the whole industry. I mean, we're talking about talent being wasted because of what? The wrong size boots.
It's crazy when you think about it that way. And it's not just about shrinking down men's gear either. Designing PPE for women, that's a whole other ballgame.
Yeah, the article got into that. Women's bodies, they're just different proportions, right?
Way more to it than just sizing.
Shoulders, hips, even the center of gravity being lower, it all matters.
It impacts how the PPE actually functions. A harness designed for a man, it might not distribute the force properly on a woman if there's a fall. That's a higher risk of injury right there.
It's like, wow. We're talking about gear that could save your life, and for so long, it's been designed with only half the population in mind.
It is pretty mind-boggling,
Yeah.
but there are people out there trying to change things. This article mentions a researcher, Katie Robinson. She's doing some really in-depth studies, talking to women, getting their feedback on PPE.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's not just about measuring, it's about understanding the real-life issues women face when they're using this gear day in, day out.
Totally. Designers need that real-world input.
Absolutely. So we've got the problems, we've got people working on solutions. What about action? What can we actually do about all this?
Well, the article's big on education, getting the word out to employers, making sure they understand the risks, the costs, the whole ethics of it all.
It's not just about the law, it's about making sure everyone understands the impact
Right.
on morale, on productivity, on keeping good workers.
Right, it's an investment, not an expense. And it's not just about buying the right stuff either. It's about creating a culture where people can speak up if something doesn't fit right.
Making safety everyone's responsibility.
Exactly. I mean, there are resources out there, like that PPE-that-fits.com site. Makes it easier for employers to actually find this stuff.
That's a good start, taking away those barriers. What about innovation, though? Are there new technologies, new materials that could make things better?
Oh, totally. The article mentions some really cool stuff, like some companies are using 3D printing to make custom-fit PPE.
Wow, that's the future right there.
Right. It's not just tweaking old designs, it's coming up with completely new solutions.
And a lot of that's being driven by the women who are actually out there, using the gear, demanding better.
It's like a whole movement for safety and inclusivity.
And that's where real change happens. I'm feeling optimistic about this. We've talked about the problems, yeah, but now we're seeing some real momentum.
I'm with you. Things are shifting, though there's still a long way to go.
Oh, for sure. We
Yeah.
can't let up now. We've got to keep the pressure on, keep pushing for progress.
Absolutely. We keep coming back to that statistic. 60% of UK employers not providing women's PPE. What do you think's behind that? Is it really just a cost thing, or is there more to it?
I think it's complicated, to be honest. Cost is a factor for some, especially smaller companies with tighter budgets.
But we've seen that's not the whole story.
Mhm.
It can actually save money in the long run to get this right.
Exactly. So cost is perception, not always the reality. Then there's just plain old lack of awareness. Some employers might not even know this stuff exists.
True. Goes back to that education piece.
Yep. And then there's the whole, this is how we've always done it mentality. Construction's been a very male-dominated field for a long time. It takes time to shift those attitudes.
Like an assumption that everyone's built the same way.
Exactly. And when it comes to safety gear, that's a dangerous assumption to make.
We've talked a lot about the practical side of this, but let's get back to the human side for a second. How does ill-fitting PPE affect women, like emotionally? The article touched on that, right?
Definitely. I mean, imagine being the only woman on a job site, and your clothes are always a mess, your gear doesn't fit. You'd feel self-conscious, out of place.
Like you don't belong there.
Exactly. And when you feel like that, it knocks your confidence.
There was a study mentioned about how ill-fitting PPE can lead to higher anxiety and stress.
Makes sense. When you're uncomfortable all the time, it takes a toll.
Safety isn't just physical. It's mental, too.
Totally. When people feel safe, they're more productive, they're happier, everyone wins.
Okay, so solutions. We've talked about educating employers, but what about, like, government regulations? Could stricter rules help speed things up?
Interesting question. I think there's definitely a role for government in setting some basic standards, making sure everyone's playing by the same rules.
But too much regulation can stifle things, right?
It's a balance, for sure. The ideal is for everyone to work together, government, industry leaders, the workers themselves, to figure out what makes sense. Rules that keep people safe without holding things back.
You know what this whole conversation makes me think of? It's bigger than just PPE. It's about making sure everyone feels welcome. Everyone feels included, no matter what.
Couldn't agree more. This is just one example of how old ways of thinking can hold people back.
And it's not just the individuals who suffer. We all lose out.
Absolutely. We need everyone to be able to reach their full potential.
Okay, so I think we've covered a lot here. The problems, the causes, some potential solutions. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final question.
I'm listening.
If safety is really the priority, shouldn't PPE be designed for everyone? no matter who you are, what you look like, what your job is.
Now, that is a question. Makes you rethink the whole idea of design, of inclusivity, of what safety really means.
It really does.
Yeah.
Why have we accepted this one-size-fits-most approach for so long? Especially when it comes to something as important as protecting people's lives.
It's a good reminder that we can always do better, that things are always evolving.
This whole deep dive, it's really got me thinking. We talk about big concepts like safety, inclusivity, but sometimes it's the little things, right? The fit of a glove, the design of a harness. Those details matter.
They really do, because those little things, they add up to a much bigger picture. It's about how we value people, how we prioritize their well-being.
And the article makes this point too. It's not just about feeling good. Investing in proper PPE for everyone, it actually makes businesses run better. Fewer accidents, more productivity, workers who are happier and more engaged.
It's smart in every sense of the word.
And you know what? This isn't just a construction thing. We see this in other fields too. Manufacturing, transportation, even the military. Anywhere you've got women entering roles that were traditionally male-dominated.
It's a pattern, and it points to a need for a bigger shift in how we design things, making sure they work for everyone from the start.
Not just shrinking it down and calling it a day. It's got to be built with inclusivity in mind from the ground up.
Exactly. And that means thinking beyond just physical differences, culture, personal preferences, all of that plays a role.
Okay, so big question. What can we do about this? What are the next steps?
Well, first off, we got to keep talking about it. Awareness is huge. Organizations like NIIC Yorkshire, they're doing great work on that front, really pushing for change within the industry.
And for our listeners, we'll put a link to their website in the show notes if you want to check them out.
Definitely worth a look. Another big thing is research. We need more data on how this stuff actually affects women. And then we need to support the people who are coming up with new solutions.
Like Katie Robinson and her research. Getting that firsthand perspective from women is so important.
Absolutely. And on the policy side, we got to make sure the rules are keeping up with the times. Maybe updating standards, creating new guidelines that specifically address these issues.
Making sure everyone's held accountable for creating a safe and welcoming work environment. No exceptions.
That's the key. Safety isn't optional.
You know, what I'm really struck by is how many women are out there leading the charge on this. Not just pointing out problems, but finding solutions, pushing for innovation.
Trailblazers, they're creating a better future for everyone.
I think this whole deep dive has shown us the power of perspective. When we listen to different voices, when we consider different experiences, we get a much clearer view of the world.
And that understanding is what leads to real change.
So I hope you've all learned something new today. Not just about PPE, but about how those hidden biases, those assumptions we make, they can have a real impact.
It's a reminder that we can always do better, always be more inclusive.
And sometimes that starts with a simple question. Does this fit? Because when it comes to safety, comfort, opportunity, everyone deserves a perfect fit.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that's about it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon with more fascinating topics to explore. Until then, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.